friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I'm going to be telling you about the books that I read during the second half of the month of October. I did do a mid-month check-in in October where I talked about the first 6 books that I read in the month. Included in that video are Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris, The Dry by Jane Harper, A Fall of Marigolds by Susan Meissner, Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren, Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Center, and Named of the Dragon by Susanna Kearsley. 5 of those 6 were on my TBR at the beginning of the month, which is awesome. I have I have 8 more books to talk to you about. One of them is a DNF. So I finished 13 books in total in the month of October, which is crazy. Considering September, I only had 4 books, and I thought maybe after my trip in September that my reading would slow down the pace of my reading, but I just read a lot of really good books this month and ones that were relatively quick reads as well, for the most part. Let me just jump right in and tell you about 7 more books plus 1 DNF that I read in the second half of the month of October. I'm going to start with the DNF just to kind of get it out of the way. It might not be a DNF forever, but it is the only book that I picked up this year for Victober. And I'm really sad that it wasn't a big hit with me, and that is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. First of all, it's not very long. It's less than 300 pages, but there was no plot whatsoever. Nothing that was moving the story forward. There was no story. It was like little vignettes of this town where the women kind of run things. It's a very matriarchal town, and this younger woman who comes to visit over and over. And so we just are learning about all of these characters in the town. They were fun little vignettes, but there was nothing moving the story forward for me. And so I was just having a really hard time with it. The pace of almost everything else I read was much quicker. And so I was very quickly losing interest in this one and eventually just decided not to pick it up anymore. However, I did just borrow the DVD from the library of Cranford, and I do have the movie tie-in cover. I'm hoping that by watching this, I may be motivated to read the rest of this one, because I did get halfway through. This is like notes at the end, so I just have a little bit left. And I loved North and South, and I have high hopes of reading Wives and Daughters, but not enjoying this one is really, however, making me a bit intimidated to pick up Wives and Daughters. So we'll see. I'm hoping again that watching the DVD will make me want to finish the book, because I have just like a little over 100 pages to go. But that's the DNF. The rest I read and loved, and I do not remember the order of them. So I will start with a graphic novel, which is abnormal for me. I don't often read graphic novels. However, I put myself on hold at the library for The Testaments, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, and it has been many years since I read The Handmaid's Tale, so I picked up the graphic novel, The Handmaid's Tale, the graphic novel. This is the art adaptation by Renee Nault by Margaret Atwood. It was an interesting way to refresh my mind of the story. I really enjoyed The Handmaid's Tale. I don't think I was as crazy about it as a lot of other people, but I did really enjoy it, and I am interested in reading The Testaments, which is the sequel that happens 15 years later after the events of this one, so I don't think the characters are really going to overlap, but we kind of see where Gilead, this land that's in The Handmaid's Tale, we see where Gilead ends up. Like, Gilead is kind of like an America that has gone off the deep end. Extreme conservatism, where extreme misogyny, extreme sexism, like men rule the roost, women have no voice, no say, and are forced into specific roles. And in this world, infertility is a huge issue. And so women who are known to have had children or who are fertile are forced to become handmaids. So they live with a family and are forced to have children for that family, which is just ridiculous and awful, and it's just so extreme, also kind of compelling to read about. So I enjoyed catching up through the, not catching up, but I enjoyed refreshing my mind through this one, and I actually do have the Testaments out from the library right now, so hopefully I get to that soon. I also read, I did a buddy read this month with Lindsay from Wandering Reader, and we read The Couple Next Door by Sherry LaPena. And this is a story about this awful couple who, the thing about this book, this is a pretty well-known thriller, or mystery thriller, I guess. It's more of a mystery than a thriller. Yeah, it's not really a thriller at all. But so this couple goes next door to have dinner with their next door neighbors, and they leave their 6-month-old baby home. It's kind of like a duplex. The houses are attached, and they bring the monitor with them. The baby is sleeping. They go every half hour to check on the baby. However, at the end of the night, when they go home for the night, the baby is missing. And so this story is about them trying to discover where their baby is she still alive, what happened. There's some twists and turns. Every single person in this book is awful. There is nobody to root for, I guess, except the baby, maybe. You just start to uncover things about every single character as the book goes on, and it got a little much at the end, but I really did enjoy reading it. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars. Honestly, I never really remember what my ratings were. I should probably pull out my Goodreads. But I think I ended up giving it 4 stars because it was definitely a page turner, definitely kept me compelled to read. I guessed a couple things along the way, but definitely not everything. It was a fun read, and I definitely loved reading this with Lindsay. I did pick up Sing Unburied Sing, and I read this with Amanda from the Curly Reader. This is by Jesmyn Ward, and earlier in October, I was able to hear Jesmyn Ward speak, which I talked about, I think, in my other wrap up at the beginning or earlier in the month. So I was thrilled to pick this up so close to when I heard her speak. In this book, we follow a young boy named Jojo and his little sister and mother, Leonie. Leonie is kind of a horrible mom in a lot of ways. And a lot of people warned me about that. At least that's what I picked up on from a lot of people's response to this book, is that the mother is just awful. And while, yes, she makes some pretty horrible decisions, I really found that I had empathy for her and could see how her grief and her lack of dealing with her grief is causing her to make a lot of these decisions. And there's also a ghost. So it's a little bit of a road trip story. Leonie and her 2 kids and a friend travel to this parchment prison, which was known to kind of re-enslave a lot of black men. It all takes place in a small town in the South. Outside of New Orleans in Mississippi. So they take a road trip to Parchment Prison, where Leonie's boyfriend, Jojo's dad, is being released, and they go to pick him up. But then we also discover that the grandpa, Pop, was in Parchment many years ago and told stories about the youngest boy to ever be in Parchment, who was like 11 or 12 years old, Richie. And so at one point in this book, we get the perspective of Richie as well. So we have kind of like the ghost of Richie talking about his time in Parchment and trying to have closure, I guess, for how things ended, how his life ended. Yeah, it was different than a lot of other books that I would normally say that I loved, but I loved this book. I loved her writing. It was so beautiful. I am not normally an award-winning reader. Like, if a book has an award on it, I'm probably not going to pick it up because I probably won't like it, but this did win the National Book Award. Jesmyn Ward's writing is absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't have, like, when I read Frederick Bachman or Bianca Marais, there was a lot of quotes, like sentences that I could pull out and say, oh, that was such a good quote. I didn't find that I had a lot of quotes in this one, but I just was blown away by the beauty of the prose. The way that it was written was just spectacular. The characters were frustrating at times, but also understandable. I loved the the grandpa, Pop, and Mama, his wife, the grandma. Loved their relationship. There was a couple scenes at the end that made me well up with tears. I didn't fully cry, but I definitely welled up with tears. There was some really beautiful scenes. There was a little bit of weirdness at the end as well that was a little unusual, I guess, but it didn't take away from me totally enjoying this book, and I couldn't give it anything except 5 stars. I loved it. Very different though, but I loved it. Then another book that I finished in October is My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, and this was a fun ride. In this book, we read from the perspective of Philip. Philip was orphaned at a young age, and his cousin Ambrose kind of raised him, and they had a very close, very special relationship. Ambrose was getting much older in age and was having some health problems and was sent to the continent for the summers or the winters or something. And while there, met another cousin of theirs, Rachel, who he married, and then Ambrose dies. Philip gets a letter that convinces him that things weren't quite right in what happened. Rachel ends up coming to their house, where Philip is now kind of the master of the house. Philip starts off wanting to throttle her, and he's very, very suspicious of her before she comes, but as he gets to know her, he questions everything. It's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to read this because you're just very suspicious. I was just very suspicious. I don't know. The tone of this book was very cool. It was very dark, very eerie. I don't know. It just had a very gothic feel to it, which Daphne du Maurier does so well, kind of similar in that way to Rebecca. And I really enjoyed this book, so much so that I did go to the library. Oh, I just bumped myself in the head. I did go to the library and borrowed My Cousin Rachel, the movie, which again, I have the movie tie-in cover, which I'm not a huge fan of normally, but I just showed 2 of them in this video. I really enjoyed the movie as well. I thought it was a really good adaptation, but a nice dark kind of mystery, kind of not incredibly fast-paced, which was what I talked about a lot of the books were. This one was not so fast-paced, but I definitely was turning pages. I definitely wanted to find out, was Rachel as menacing as Philip thought she might be? What happened to Ambrose? It was very good. I don't want to say too much without giving everything away, I guess. I don't know. Another book that I finished was The Eyre Affair by Jasper Fforde. I was having a really hard time with this book this month. I read a little more than half of it in the physical copy that I have here, and I almost was prepared to DNF this story. We're kind of dropped right into the middle of this futuristic type of world, this surreal kind of world in England, where cloning people is common, literature is a huge part of society, time travel and time warp situations are common, and somehow Thursday Next is an special operative in the literature tech department. And what happens is there's this villain character who steals a manuscript of Dickens. He is supposedly like this most evil villain, and he's diabolical. He can hear people talk about him from far away, so he knows you can't sneak up on him. He doesn't show up on camera. There's all this weird stuff about this villain, and somehow there's a connection between this villain and Thursday Next. She tries to track him down. Eventually, Jane Eyre is kidnapped, and that's all on the back. That happens way late in the book, so it shouldn't be part of the back copy. But literature is very heavy in this world, and a lot of that went over my head. There's no real getting settled in what this world is like, so it just kept being one strange thing on top of another strange thing, and it was just so bizarre, and I couldn't wrap my mind around what was actually going on. I had nowhere to predict what was going to happen. I don't know, it was so weird. Someone suggested to me to listen to the audiobook, and I did that for the second half, and that was 2 thumbs up. I definitely loved the audiobook so much better than the print version. I felt like maybe because I had done the work for the first half of the book, but I felt like I was able to connect with the characters a little more. I got definitely more invested in the story. I am interested in continuing on. I think this is a 5-book series, but if I continue on, I will try to find the audiobooks for sure. I ended the month with some library books. I've been doing so good reading books from my shelves, and I think that's because of the recommendations project this year. But I did end up the month with 2 library books that I just read a day each. So the first one was Vox by Christina Delcher. This book was unfortunately a bit of a miss for me. I was very interested in reading some dystopian. I was kind of in this Handmaid's Tale vibe and wanting to read more along those lines. And in this sort of version of America, the extreme religious right have achieved some power and have made it so that women are no longer able to travel or work or even speak more than 100 words a day. They have to wear a device on their wrists that prevents them that actually shocks them if their word count goes over 100 words a day. They're not even allowed to learn sign language. They're just not allowed to communicate whatsoever. So in this world, this woman named Jean formerly was a neuroscientist who also studied linguistics. She was dealing with patients who had lost their ability to speak, maybe because of a stroke or whatever, and the part of the brain that affects our vocalization. And so she is called upon to help heal or figure out what's gone on with the president's brother who had some kind of accident. Anyways, so she is struggling against this, struggling in this society as being this woman who has all this knowledge and ability and just being so silenced. And how is she going to find her voice? It sounds like it would be a book that was really good. However, this Christina Dalcher, instead of talking about the extreme religious right, she constantly just said Christians. And it really started to grate on my nerves as somebody who is a Christian. I don't connect with some of the crazy extreme religious right at all. That is not, to me, what Christianity is all about. But I felt like all Christians were kind of lumped together in this book, and it came across as very anti-Christian, and that just rubbed me the wrong way, and it started to annoy me. I felt like it also was just kind of clunky and some holes in places. You really had to suspend disbelief, obviously, but I think it was meant to be like, we're headed in this direction, and I just don't see that happening. But I read all the way to the end. I think I ended up giving it just 2 stars. It just was a big miss for me. Just the other day, I threw this book in at the end of the month, Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. Picked this one up from the library kind of on a whim. This is a thriller, which is another genre that I just don't read all that often. Super popular. It was a book of the month option last month, I think. And so many people have been talking about this book lately. So in this one, this young girl named Jules, early 20s, really struggling financially, is kind of alone in the world. Her parents both died and her sister is missing. So she has nobody. Broke up with a boyfriend kind of tragically, ends up on her best friend's couch, finds an ad on Craigslist to be an apartment sitter in this fancy hotel in the Upper West Side of New York City called the Bartholomew. It seems so good to be way too good to be true, and it is. There are a lot of rules that she has to follow. She's not allowed to have visitors. She has to be in the apartment every night. But it turns out other apartment sitters have gone missing, and Jules is super suspicious and tries to figure out why. This whole book takes place over the course of a week, maybe not even a week, like 5 days or 6 days. Very fast paced. It started going in a direction that I was like, oh no, we are not going down this road. And then it twisted a little bit, which was good. I was glad of that. But yeah, you have to suspend belief for this one quite a bit as well. But I did really enjoy the ride that it took me on, and I read the whole thing in like a day and a half, and it's not super short. It's like just 350 pages or so. I definitely was along for the ride, and I think I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was a lot of fun. And just kind of the mood that I was in. I was ready for something like this. That is all that I finished. It is currently October 31st, and I am probably going to finish this book as well tonight, Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This is a historical romance. Krista, what? I don't think I've ever talked about a historical romance on my channel other than a Christian historical romance. This is definitely not a clean historical romance. It is definitely a little bit steamy. It's just the right book at the right time. I want something light and fun, and it is that. In this book, we follow a woman named Annabelle who is young. She's among the first to go to the women's college at Oxford once it opens its doors to women. It's kind of during the suffragette movement. I don't know the time period, 1879 in England. And she gets a scholarship in a way to go to the women's college at Oxford. And part of that scholarship means that she has to help the suffragette movement. So their job, these women's job is to convince men who currently have the vote to vote in such a way that would allow that to be opened up, the vote to be opened up to women as well, and for the women to keep their own property when they get married, that it doesn't all automatically deflect to the men. It's just a lot of fun. It is interesting to kind of see a little bit of the suffragette movement, what that might have been like. I don't read this like a historical fiction. Like, I don't feel like loads of research has gone into it. Maybe it has, but I don't really know. It's just not a genre that I'm super familiar with, but it's a lot of fun and I'm enjoying it. And I'm honestly probably going to finish it tonight. So I'm going to include that here in this wrap up, even though I'm not quite finished with it yet. I did make a good amount of progress in The Count of Monte Cristo in October as well. Look I'm like more than halfway. I'm like 2/3 of the way, maybe 3/4 of the way done. So I only have this little bit left, which is exciting. I have a long drive coming up this weekend, so I'm hoping to get a good chunk of that done. And the other book that I'm in the middle of is a book that I did not include in my November TBR, but it is a book that I need to read for my job at the church, and that is The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. It's a very popular, common leadership book that just talks about 21 different qualities of leadership and types of leadership and ways to grow in your leadership. And I'm really enjoying it. It's pretty fast paced and I feel like I'm getting a lot out of it. So I won't finish that one today, but I am in the middle of it. I'm going to stop there. Even though I have like 2 or 3 more books that I've started, I'm going to stop there. That is a lot. I rocked my October reading. Holy moly. So here, that's so awkward. So here are the books that I finished in the second half of October. I would love to hear from you. What were some of your favorite reads from the month? Have you read any of these? Did you have similar thoughts, or are any of these on your TBR, or any of you going to pick up soon? I really loved a lot of my reading in the month of October. Probably liked the beginning of the month better than the end of the month, but I read more at the end of the month. I just wasn't thrilled about all of them. A lot of different stuff this month, which was kind of fun. I love that. I look forward to chatting with you down in the comments. Let's chat down there about these books, about anything else that you want to talk about. You guys know I love talking to you down in the comments. Give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be talking to you in another video very soon. Bye.